swipe after swipe, but in the end you still feel empty. What were you even looking for? You can't remember anymore. Comparing ourselves to others, we think happiness lies.
반갑습니다. 저는 변호사 템플스테이를 담당하고 있는 연수과장 장산스님. 네, 그래서 이제 여기가 이제 부산 국제불교박람회 가서 국제 취지에 맞게 저는 이제 영어로 법문을 해달라는 부탁을 받아서 제가 한국말을 하는 거는 당분간 이게 마지막이 될 것 같습니다. 그래서 제가 준비한 법문은 다 영어로 준비되어 있기 때문에 외국 분들을 향해서 이제 만든 거라 제가 일단 한국 분들이 많아서 최대한 좀 느리게 영어를 할 텐데 일단 모든 것들은 다 영어로 되어 있기 때문에 일단 이걸로 말씀드리고 이제 시작을 해야 될 것 같습니다. 마지막으로 제가 나중에 물어보실까봐 왜 영어를 하느냐. 그래서 저는 이제 출가하기 전에 이제 미국에서 좀 오래 살았습니다. 제가 초등학교 6학년 때 미국으로 이민을 가가지고 출가하기 바로 직전까지 미국에서 살았기 때문에 국적도 이제 미국입니다. 한국에서는 출가하고 나서 이렇게 한 군데서 오래 산 지가 없었어가지고 사실 이 부산이 제가 태어나서 한국에서는 제일 오래 사는 거예요. 그래서 고향이 이제 부산처럼 됐는데 어쨌든 그래서 저는 한국어보다는 영어가 조금 더 편하기 때문에 일단 그래서 이제 영어로 한다는 점 말씀드리고 이제 시작하도록 하겠습니다. Okay, hello everyone. My name is 장산, and like I said, the entire Dharma talk is going to be in English. So I figured for the international visitors, at least the ones that we have today, that is probably new or not very familiar with Buddhism. So I tried to make this Dharma talk as a basic introductory course into Buddhism, to understand a little bit more and to provide a starting place in learning Buddhism. Because Buddhism is so vast, is so large, and it ranges on a lot of different topics. A lot of times people have trouble finding a starting point for Buddhism. So the Dharma talk for me today is to provide that starting place where you guys can start off. So the theme is actually social media, right? So stop scrolling, start living. These days it's more swiping than scrolling, right? So if you don't know what scrolling is turning the screen on your phone, right? When you use your thumb. So the theme or topic is to provide some solutions, some Buddhist solutions to the problems that people may have in using social media. So to move on, can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so the question that I want to start off with is, what kind of problems do we have with social media today? So I figured it'd be very hard to get any kind of participation from the audience. So actually I prepared a little bit of a bribery. So if you participate in my questions in any way, I will provide a small gift for participating to say thank you. So if you have an answer, if you think you know, please just yell it out, and then I'll try to remember all your faces, and after I'm done, I'm going to give you guys a gift. So Would anyone like to take a guess? It doesn't have to be a phrase, it can just be a word, right? So I'll give you guys the first one. So the first one is depression, right? So one of the big problems with social media today is a lot of people get depressed. So that is one. Does anyone know, or would anyone like to take a guess at any of the other possible answers? No? Okay, I figured as much. So can I have the next slide? Okay, so here are some of the answers I could come up with. There's probably a lot more, right? So you have depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, peer pressure, what else? Competition, comparison. So, okay, so maybe I have to go a little slower, right? So depression is being sad, right? Everyone knows that. Anxiety is being nervous. Low self-esteem is a low sense of identity, right? So self-esteem is self-esteem. So competition, comparison, right? Usually, this is especially true for Korean people, right? Social media is a huge place for competition or comparing your friends, your family, people around you, right? So that's a big problem in Korea, especially. Pressure to maintain unrealistic personas. So this one is relevant as well. So it's having this image of yourself that's not really you. You may do it for people to follow you because you want attention, or because somehow you think the number of followers you have is associated with your self-esteem or your self-identity. So in order to maintain those followers, or in order to maintain that popularity, you have this unrealistic persona that's different from who you really are. So that's this one. Addiction, right? So sometimes, this is mostly, say, TikTok or YouTube shorts, right? Usually something short, you get addicted and you just can't stop. Harmful content, fraud, these are all pretty self-explanatory, right? Lack of sleep, cyberbullying. So cyberbullying is, I don't know if it's very serious in Korea, but if you go to America or some of the other Western countries, cyberbullying is actually a big problem there. So I don't know, is it the same for Korea, or I haven't been young for a while, so maybe some of the younger audiences can answer for me. But yeah, so cyberbullying is a problem. And then the last one is body image issues, right? So not so true for Koreans maybe, because all of you guys, you look healthy to me, right? If you go to America, we have an obesity problem, right? Everyone's fat. So they have these big body issue images, right? Especially in trying to look skinny or look beautiful, look like a model, right? So we have those kinds of problems in the Western societies. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so what is the most fundamental reason why people suffer from these problems? So I listed some of the possible problems that you can have in using social media. And I want to ask, all of these different forms of suffering, what is the common denominator between these problems? What is the source of all these different kinds of problems? So do different problems have different sources? Or do they all share something in common, right? So in order to answer that, can we have the next slide? Okay, so it is the same for any and all forms of suffering in our lives, not just social media. So Buddhism offers the same solution for basically any suffering in life. So in Buddhism, at least, we say that the problems that we are facing, the different kinds of problems that we have in society or in social media, or it's actually not just limited to social media, right? It applies to all the other stuff as well. Relationships or work, whatever it is, all these problems that you have, the source of the suffering itself is of a singular reason, and there is a one solution for all those different kinds of suffering. So that's what Buddhism is trying to teach, and it's trying to show you guys a way to deal with that. So next slide, please. Okay, so actually the theme is clickbait. So I put that in there because what I'm going to tell you is not just limited to social media. It can be applied to everything in life. So that's why I put clickbait. So if you don't know what clickbait is, it's something to make you click, right? So usually it's a lie or it's something false, like false advertising. So I'll get back to that. That's a joke. It's not actually clickbait. So next slide, please. Okay, so what I'm going to be talking about, like I said, is not limited to social media, but it's something that's applicable to all areas in life because that's Buddhism, right? Buddhism applies to all of it. So this is, you can consider this as just a basic introductory course into Buddhism. So basically Buddhism 101. I don't know how you guys name courses in university, but in American universities, usually the most introductory course is 101, right? So is that the same here? No? Okay. Because I didn't go to college here, so I don't know. Okay, so next. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to start off with the most basic of the Buddha's teachings. So the first one is called the Four Noble Truths. So this is basically 4 things that are true about this universe, about life. And it's just to kind of make it a statement that it's true. So the first one, it says life is dukkha. So normally when we say it in English, we say life is suffering. But that's not actually accurate because the word dukkha does not mean just suffering. It actually also means, like it says here, it says suffering, pain, unsatisfactoriness, unease. So it refers to the inherent unsatisfactoriness of all phenomena. So to help you guys understand a little bit more, for example, there is a difference between pain and suffering in Buddhism. So again, would anyone like to explain the difference between pain and suffering? Is it a similar word or is it a different word? Pain and suffering. Not similar, different. So how is it different? Physical and mental. Okay, that's a good guess. But in Buddhism we say pain is both physical and mental. So physical and mental pain is still pain. They're both pain. So it's not the difference between physical and mental. Thank you. I'm gonna remember you right there. Yeah. So you two guys, I'll try to remember. Okay. Any other guesses? Pain and suffering. What is pain? What is suffering? So pain is an experience. It's a moment. It can be physical or mental. So if you fall down and you hurt your leg, that's pain. If somebody breaks up with you, right? That's pain. So pain is referring to a singular moment in life, right? It's an experience that you have. That's a feeling. Suffering is something that comes from pain, usually. Not all the time, but usually. So suffering is something like this. So let's say that you fell and you injured your leg. You feel the experience of pain, right? But then after that, you think, oh, why was that banana there that I slipped on? Why did it have to be me? So if you have these thoughts afterwards and you create more pain for yourself, that in Buddhism we say is suffering. So it's kind of an extension from the feeling or experience of pain, and you make it more and more worse for yourself. So that's the difference between pain and suffering. So in Buddhism, both of that is dukkha, right? So same thing for unsatisfactoriness. So it's the same thing in Korean. So in Korean, they say 일체 개고, 인생은 고다. 그렇게 이렇게 설명을 하는데 고라는 게 한자로 이제 보통 고통이라고 해서 인생은 고통이다라고 이제 해석을 많이 하는데 개인적으로는 이 번역이 좀 마음에 안 듭니다. 저는 개인적으로 차라리 요 첫 번째 진리를 얘기를 할 때는 인생은 고통이다라고 하는 것보다는 인생은 불만족스럽다라고 해석을 하는 게 조금 더 정확하지 않나 생각을 합니다. Okay, so I broke my promise. I said I wouldn't speak Korean, but I do. So the second one is the origin of suffering. So where does that suffering come from? So in Buddhism, there's actually different ways of explaining this, but one of the main ways is by explaining the three poisons, right? So the three poisons is craving or attachment or greed. The second one is hatred or aversion. And the third one is ignorance or delusion. So we say all your forms of suffering comes from one or a mixture of these three. So especially ignorance. So they say ignorance is the base of the first two. So you are greedy and you attach because you're ignorant. You hate and you avoid because you are ignorant. So this is just a very simplified explanation for the second truth. The third truth is the cessation of suffering. So who knows what cessation means? So I think this one's a little more difficult, so you probably won't be able to understand it. Cessation means removal or ending. So it's a hard word. It's a hard English word for a very simplified meaning. So basically the ending or removal of suffering. So the third truth is that it can be removed, and it can be removed permanently, right? Did I write that? Yes, I did. And then the fourth one is the path to the cessation of suffering. So there is a way, and in Buddhism we say that the way is the Noble Eightfold Path. So that's going to be the next teaching of the Buddha that I'm going to share with you guys. So next slide, please. Okay, so this is the 8 steps that you can take to remove suffering for yourself. It's both a moral and ethical guideline, as well as just a practical way of removing things. It's a systemized way of removing suffering for yourself. So the first one is right view, and I think this is probably the most important, because if you want to identify what the suffering is, you really have to identify who's suffering as well. So the important thing is where you start off from. What kind of view do you need to have in order to correctly identify the problem and how to solve it? So the first one, right view, there's different ways of having right view. So the first one is dependent origination. So this is also one of the key teachings of the Buddha. Dependent origination simply means cause and effect. So everything is karma. Everything has a reason. So in Buddhism, there is no such thing as a coincidence. So for example, why were you born male or female? Why were you born in Korea? Why were you born Asian? Right? Why were you born in this time period? So is it just all coincidence? Is it just all luck, happen chance? How do you explain this? So in Buddhism, we say that is your karma, right? So the things you did in your past life, for example, determines your karma for your current life. And the things that you do in your current life will determine the karma of your future lives. So everything is connected. Nothing can exist independently and without any relationship to anything else. So this is one of the core teachings of Buddhism. So the idea that everything has a cause and effect. So all the things that you do will have an influence on yourself and others in the future. The second one is the 3 marks of existence. So this one I'll actually go over a little bit more in detail later on. So I'm not going to mention it right now. The third one is the 4 noble truths. So this one is obvious, right? It's a truth. So it's something you need to be able to accept in order to have the right view and to start off in practicing Buddhism. So the second one is right thought. So after you have the correct view, so the view is like the direction, right? The direction you want to go. Then the thought is actually walking in that direction. So you want to have right thought. And here it says right thought is aspiration. So anyone, again, would like to guess for a chocolate what aspiration means? This is like an English class, right? It's not really like a Dharma class. What is aspiration? I can't hear you. I still can't hear you. You gotta like really yell. 영광? 영광. That's inspiration. Oh, okay, but good guess. Yeah. 열망. Aspiration. Yeah. 열망. I guess you could say. Okay, so yeah, remind me to, yeah. Okay, so aspiration is trying to achieve a goal, right? The motivations for trying to achieve something. So yeah, that is actually correct. So aspiration, motivation, so they're synonyms, right? They're similar words. And mindset, based on right view. So that's pretty obvious. The second one is probably another concept that's very important in Buddhism. So wisdom and compassion. So wisdom and compassion are two things that are absolutely necessary in Buddhism. And this is not something that happens naturally, right? You really have to work, you really have to put an effort in order to grow wisdom and grow compassion. And compassion applies to both oneself and to others, right? So we're not talking about compassion just, to others, The Christian version is love thy neighbors, right? So it's not just neighbors, it's also yourself. You need to have compassion for yourself. Okay, and then the next one is right speech. This one I'm just gonna go over really quickly. It's not really important right here, right now. So, and they're pretty obvious, right? So right speech is not lying, not using divisive speech. So any guess on divisive speech? What is divisive speech? This one seems pretty obvious because divide is pretty obvious and speech is pretty obvious. So what is divisive speech? If you can answer it in Korean as long as if I can hear it, So there's a word for it in Korean. No? No guesses? Divisive, dividing speech. No? Okay. So I'm gonna pass by then because I don't want to take too much time. 이간질. So you divide people by speech, right? So divisive speech. Abusive speech. Abusive is pretty obvious. And idle. Chatter. So idle just means useless, right? Unnecessary. And then right conduct, right action. Abstain from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct. Again, pretty obvious ones. So I'm just gonna blow by these. Next slide, please. Okay, so right livelihood. So for the monks, right livelihood is no fortune telling. So basically it means no using supernatural powers. So has anyone ever met a monk who does fortune telling or writes you like a protection, what do you call them? Like, I forgot the English word, like these protection seals or whatever. Has anyone ever met a monk like that? No? Okay, so if you ever do meet a monk who says, I can do fortune telling, or I can see your future, or I have this supernatural power, then that's a bad monk, and you should probably run away from it, because monks are not supposed to do that, right? So no fortune telling, and to not possess more than necessary, right? So frugality. And then for lay people, so lay people means you guys, right? The non-monks. So for lay people, no killing living beings, human trafficking, dealing drugs, etc. to make a living. So this is just one of the many examples of how to live rightly, right? So right livelihood. this is not the complete list, it's just a couple of examples, right? So you can look it up if you want to know more, but this is just the basic stuff. And I'm only doing the basic stuff, right? And then the next one is right effort. So to prevent unwholesome states and to promote wholesome states. So this has relations to the three poisons. So the three poisons that I mentioned, greed, hatred, and ignorance. So wholesome states is, the unwholesome states is obviously these three, right? So you want to do four things. So it is to remove any unwholesome states that you may already have, to prevent new unwholesome states from occurring or appearing, and then to keep the wholesome states that you already have, and to generate more of the wholesome states that you don't have. So that's what it's referring to when it says right effort. Next, right mindfulness. In mindfulness, there's a word called sati, and sati is basically a quality that guards or watches over the mind from unwholesome states. So basically what happens is, if you do the right effort, if you do it consistently, if you do it many times over, then you have the right mindset, right? The right mindfulness. And if you have the right mindfulness, then you have the last one, right? Samadhi. Samadhi is samme, right, in Korean. So samadhi is referring to concentration or unification of mind. So it's basically a state of mind characterized by mindfulness. So you do the effort, then you become mindful, then you achieve samadhi, right? So that's the process in Buddhism. So you don't, this is important because in Buddhism we don't say you have to have the mindset first and then do the actions. We say you do the actions and then you get the mindset, right? So the order is very important as well. So this is the basics, the very, very basics of Buddhism. So if you want to know about the Buddha's teaching, for example, where do you start? And I think the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path, these two is where you start off. This is the most basics of the basics in Buddhism. So from here, you can go on to other things as well. So next slide, please. So just to mention what some of those other things are. For example, another one that's big is the concept of sunyata. So sunyata means emptiness in English. Does anyone know what emptiness means in Korean, in Buddhism? This is a big concept, so maybe you've heard of it. 공이라는 단어 들어보셨어요? 공하다. So that's emptiness. So emptiness means all things are empty of intrinsic existence and nature. So that refers to the body, the mind, everything. So actually, in order to help understand this concept, I actually brought up a story. So this one I actually chose because most English speakers don't know about this story, but I think most Koreans will know this story. So if you can tell me the name of the story in Korean, again, I am wagering a chocolate. So this is an example of the concept of emptiness. So try to see if you can figure it out, right? Okay, so this is a story, a parable. It's called the, actually, I shouldn't say the title because you might figure it out. So there was a farmer in a small village with a single horse who helped him earn a living for his family. The other villagers constantly told the farmer how lucky he was to have such a great horse. And he replied, maybe. One day, the horse ran away. The villagers came to the farmer to express their sympathies. It's to, to console him. Okay, that's a hard word. How do I say it? To make him feel better, right? Okay, so, and the farmer, again, he said, maybe. A few days later, the horse returned home with 10 strong wild horses in tow. So in tow means together. So the horse ran away. When it came back with 10 other horses. So the farmer now has 11 horses. So the people, the villagers of the town, again, went to the farmer and said, what good fortune, what incredible luck, we're happy for you. And again, the farmer just said, maybe. The following week, the farmer's son was riding one of the wild horses in the fields when it kicked him off and broke his leg. Again, the villagers arrived to express their dismay. What dismal luck, they said. And again, the farmer says, maybe. The next month, a military officer marched into the village, recruiting able-bodied young men for the war. The farmer's son, with his broken leg, was left behind. The villagers were joyful and said, your son has been spared, what beautiful luck. And the farmer again applied, maybe. So what is the name of this in Korean? Anyone know? Yes, 맞습니다. Again, please receive your chocolate after this. Make sure I remember you. Okay. Yeah, so that's a very famous story in Korea, right? But Westerners, they don't know this story as well. Have you guys ever heard of it? Yeah? Oh, okay. Is there a Myanmar version of it or no? Okay, so you heard it in Korean then? Okay, so yeah. Again, so most of the Western people, they don't know this story. But this is an example of sunyata or emptiness, right? In a form. It's not exact, but so there's no inherent good or bad in things, right? It's how you interpret it. It depends on the circumstances. It's much more complicated than just to say something is good or bad. So that's what it's trying to teach. And then sunyata is related to the 3 marks of existence, which I explained that I would go into a little bit more detail. Because I believe this is also one of the core teachings in Buddhism, probably more as important as the things that I talked about so far. So the first one is the idea of impermanence. So in Buddhism, we say nothing in this universe is permanent. Everything is impermanent. And that is related to this idea of emptiness, right? Everything is empty of intrinsic existence in nature. The reason why in Buddhism we say everything is impermanent is because everything is changing. There's nothing that does not change, right? And science is awesome because now we can explain that scientifically, right? So for example, if you have a table, is this table not changing ever? Is it just a table forever, right? So even though in our eyes, it doesn't seem to be changing. If you look at it from a molecular level, for example, it's changing in the molecular level. If you look at the atoms, for example, that make up this table, the atom is constantly moving, right? So science is awesome. You can tell that nothing in this universe is fixed. It's never unchanging, right? Everything is changing constantly and it's always impermanent. So that's a truth that we have in Buddhism. And that's why it also teaches the idea of non-self. So it's not no self, right? Oftentimes a lot of Korean people, they understand it as no self because when it was translated into Chinese, it said 무아, right? 없을 무자에 나아자. So people think there is no I, there is no self. But that's a mistranslation, right? So in English, we usually describe it as there is nothing that can be called a self. So, another quick example by science. What is 70% of your body? Water, right? So, is there anything in that water that says that's you? It's just water, right? It's the same water as H2O. So what makes you you, right? Your body, for example. and a lot of people will say DNA. So if I break down DNA, then is there you in the components that make up DNA? Right? Yes? No? So, okay, food for thought, right? Something to think about. So that's how you would approach it if you were to approach it scientifically. But again, in Buddhism, that's why we say there is nothing that can be called a self. So in order to have the right view, again, going back to the Noble Eightfold Path, that's where you would have to start off. Who am I? What am I? Right? So that I'll get into a little bit after this one, actually. But the last one is pretty self-explanatory, dukkha, right? Suffering. So life is unsatisfactoriness. Okay, next slide. So I wanted to mention again, so this idea of who am I, what am I? So if you really think about the concept of emptiness, of impermanence, of the non-self, you know, a lot of times people think Buddhism is a religion where we offer wisdom. So if you have some kind of problem in life, you can go to a monk and share your problems, and the monk will somehow come up with a very wise way of dealing with your problem. But that's not actually what Buddhism is about, really. I mean, that's one of the roles that Buddhism has. But in a more fundamental level, Buddhism tries to answer the source of all of your suffering, not just the specific problems that you may have in the moments of your life. So we're trying to really get at the core of all the problems, right? The essential core, the nature. So in order to do that, you really do have to ask then who is doing the suffering, right? What? So when you say, I'm hurt, or I'm sad, or I'm angry, then don't you think it's important to understand what this I is, right? So if you're using the word I all the time, then if I ask you, who are you? Then you should be able to answer that, right? But a lot of people, apparently they can't. So that's what Buddhism is trying to answer. So in Korean Buddhism especially, the way they approach this method to answer that question is different. So I don't want to talk about the other Buddhisms, but in Korean Buddhism, they try to answer this question, who am I or what am I, as directly as possible through experience. So rather than reading books, trying to understand this intellectually, for Korean Buddhism, we have tried to give or provide a direct experience. So in Korean Buddhism, we have something called Kanasan, which is a type of sun meditation, where a master will give the disciple a hwadu, right? And the hwadu is a question that the disciple has to answer. Except the question is like a nonsense quiz. So it's not something you answer with logic. It's really something that's trying to get at the core of answering this, who am I, or what am I? So an example of sun meditation, it says here in quotes, if during your meditation you see the Buddha, kill the Buddha, right? So that's how you want to approach sun meditation. So it's trying to go beyond the thinking, like I said earlier, good or bad. Is this good or is this bad? Is this the Buddha or is this not Buddha? Is this enlightenment or is this not enlightenment? So you don't want to think in terms of duality. You don't want to think in terms of right or wrong. You want to go beyond that, or more fundamental than that. So the last one I want to explain before I end this Dharma talk is a story. This is also a story that's very famous in sun meditation. So if you understand this story, then you understand sun meditation. So this is a very famous story in the book Mumongkan, which is the gateless gate. So in Korean, it's Mumongkan, right? So it's Gute's finger. So there was a monk. His name was Gute. and he lived up in the mountains with a very young apprentice. So he was a boy monk. So the two lived together up in the mountains in a temple. And because the older monk, Gute, was such an enlightened and famous monk, people visited him all the time in order to receive his teachings. So one day, Gute had to leave the temple to visit a friend. So the young boy was left alone. And on that day, like any other day, people visited the temple in order to meet Gute. But because Gute was not there, they asked the younger monk, what does the master teach? What is Gute's teaching? And Gute, his teaching in Sun meditation is the finger. So whenever you ask any question to Gute, his answer would be the finger. So if you ask Gute, what is enlightenment? He'll go. If you ask him, what is Buddhism? He goes. What is life and death? He goes. Right? So that's his Sun answer, right? And so the boy, because he saw that the master, all he does is this, right? So when the visitors asked the young monk, what does Gute teach? What does he do? So the visitors, they go, oh, that's great, okay, thank you. And then they leave. The next day, when Gute returned, he heard about the story of what happened. And so he calls the young monk and he goes, there were some visitors yesterday that I heard. So what did you tell them? And the young boy, he goes, and Gute, he grabs the young boy's finger, takes a knife out, and cuts his finger. So the boy is bleeding from his finger, right? So he grabs his finger and he's running out the room. And Gute calls him, young boy, whatever his name was. And the young boy turns around. What do you think Gute says? So the moment the young boy saw the finger, he became enlightened. So that's the story of Gute's finger. So if you can understand that, then you understand a little bit about Sun Buddhism, right? So in order to give you guys a hint of the meaning in that story, it's to try and think of beyond good or evil, right or wrong, right? It's what I was talking about the whole time earlier, right? So what is this I? Is this I any different from everyone else, or are we all the same? The more you ask questions in this direction, then the more you're going into this type of Sun meditation. But I don't want to get too much further than that because then it gets really complicated. So this was supposed to be just a very, very introductory course into Buddhism to try and get you guys interested at least. So even if you don't understand, it's okay. So next slide, please. So to go back to the original topic, right? So I don't want this to be clickbait. How can we solve problems related to social media? So based on everything I've said, what do you think might be some ways you can approach the problems that we mentioned at the beginning? Actually, I don't want to hear answers. You probably have your own thoughts, right? So if you didn't understand anything I said, right? It was too much. The English was too fast. Or it's just simply too much information, right? Next slide, please. So the one thing to take away today. So everything that I was talking about so far, if you had to take this one word, just one word for you guys to think about after this is, next slide please, self-reflection. So the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, Sun meditation, everything that I talked about so far, it does not have to do with doing something about that problem, right? So if your problem is social media, then you're not going to solve anything by doing anything to social media. You make new laws regarding it, or you put some kind of app on your phone that limits the number of hours you can use social media, all of that stuff. That's not going to fundamentally solve your problems. If you really want to solve the problems that you have, whether it's social media or anything else, my one-word answer that I think Buddhism offers is self-reflection. So, okay, that's it for today. What time is it? 47. So I think I have like 10 minutes. So thank you for listening. Please come up and receive your chocolate after you're done if you have questions. And I'm going to end the talk with this. 감사합니다. So any questions regarding what I've explained so far? 네, 뭐 시간 한 10분 정도 남았는데 혹시라도 뭐 궁금한 거 있으시면은 지금 물어보시면 제가 대답해드리도록 하겠습니다.
Thank you for your good, interesting lectures. But as a beginner to the Buddhism, you said we should know that about who I am I, what is that something, but the conclusion, your conclusion, self-reflections. But how do I approach self-reflection? Because the young monk all of a sudden enlightened from the cotton finger, but he saw the kind of illusion. But how can we do self-reflection that is smoother and easier? That is my point.
Okay, so if I were to answer that, I would say there are two directions you can approach it from. First, you can learn more about the teachings of Buddhism. You can try to approach it in a philosophical way, right? So in Buddhism, there are lots of sutras, lots of books that offer intellectual analyzations and interpretations on what the self is. So if you want to approach it in a more logical manner, then I would suggest that you read books, right? And try to understand the Buddhist perspective on what a self is. The other method is to simply meditate, right? So sit down and try to put it into practice. Really think about what makes you you then, right? So what is a self? You can't really answer that unless you experience that for yourself. So that's something you would eventually have to do anyway. So you can either read books and try to approach it in a more philosophical sense, or you can just meditate and try to put it into actual practice. When you meditate, sit down, really try to analyze what is a self. Is this body a self? Is this mind a self, right? So is your mind a self, do you think? Is your thinking, is that a part of you? Yes? No?
I don't understand it exactly, but is it okay to meditate at home?
Yeah.
Reading a Buddhism book is okay in the home, but
Yes.
to meditate at home is, I think, a little bit difficult.
Why?
I'm not sure. I don't know.
Then there are temples you can go to where you can learn for free. So not all. I think most meditation programs are free, or at least very cheap. It's not expensive. So if you're having trouble meditating at home, then definitely go visit a temple. Or these days there are meditation centers in town, right? That's not related to Buddhism as well, but. There's lots of different options. There's lots of different ways you can do it. You don't have to necessarily come to the temple, right? Yeah. So the important thing is that you do it, right? So if you can do it, then that's at least it's better than nothing. Okay. Thank you for the question. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you for your inspiring talk today. When you talk about self-reflection, I'm curious about how has your life changed after becoming a monk? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so for me, it's not like I'm done with self-reflection, right? It's not like I'm completed. It's the same thing for me as well, right? So for me, I am also trying to do self-reflection as often as I can. And being a monk, it definitely provides more opportunities, more times to do that, right? To practice, whether it's meditation or Buddhism or whatever, self-reflection. Being a monk definitely allows you the circumstances, the opportunities to practice self-reflection. So, even for me, yeah, it's the same as you guys, I still have a long way to go. It's just that being a monk is just a little bit easier to do than lay people, right? I don't have to worry about a job or a house or family. So, does that answer your question? 네, 제가 했던 법문 관련 없이도 그냥 평소에 궁금하셨던 거 있으시면은 시간 남는 대로 답변해 드리려고 하겠습니다. 또 개인적인 질문 상관없습니다. 그냥 물어보고 싶은 거 스님들 이런 거 이런 기회 자체가 별로 흔하지가 않아서 없으시면은 이제 마무리하도록 하겠습니다. 네, 그러면은 마무리하도록 죄송합니다.
Last one. Can you recommend a book for Buddhism beginner?
Yeah, that's really hard. So the books for beginners. So an English book or a Korean book? It doesn't matter. Korean book. Okay. So when the monks they first start out, there is a list of books that we need to read. So one of the ones that I would recommend for lay people as well is The Birth of the Buddha. So 부처님의 생애라는 책이 있습니다. So 그거는 이제 부처님이 태어났을 때부터 이제 수행하고 깨닫고 돌아가실 때까지 그냥 이제 인생을 담아 있는 책입니다. 그래서 불교에 대해서 정말 기초부터 처음 단계부터 이렇게 시작을 하시려면은 그래도 불교라는 종교의 근원이 된 부처님에 대해서 조금 기본적으로는 아셔야 할 것들이 있으니까 부처님의 생애라는 책을 추천드립니다. Okay, so thank you again for listening to me talk by myself for an hour. It must have been excruciating. Again, anyone who's participated, please take one after this, and thank you. So, yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.